recording. So obviously, before we talked about the whole process from when you first get a client and how you should work that buyer all the way until you get under contract. And then today we're going to be talking about from when you get under contract to when you get to closing. For some of you, you're more experienced agents. This is kind of going to be more like a review. You might, get a few things here and there out of it, but for the most part, it's going to be a lot of things that you're already aware of. But sometimes it's good for a refresher. Sometimes it's good to, kind of refresh things, and maybe there's some things you're not doing that you should be doing that, we'll talk about in the training. So guys, let's jump right into it. Let me share my screen with you guys. Dun, dun, dun. All right, guys. So again, what we're going to talk about today is going to be, working with buyers. What are the things you should be doing to make sure that the experience from contract to close is as smooth as possible. You're, making sure that the client experience is good, that, there's nothing that can slip to the cracks. And you're basically trying to avoid as much as you can having issues. Oh, I forgot this day, I forgot that. We're going to talk about inspection. We're going to talk about appraisal. We're going to talk about title, lending, all those things and how they all tie into the process from when you're under contract all the way to the closing. And we're going to talk a little bit about post-closing as well. So let's just jump right in it, guys. So once you're under contract, guys, the very first thing you should be doing is communicating and setting the expectations, for the buyer. You want to make sure you get your date set. You want to make sure you make everybody aware of when you start. So remember, guys, that when you get the effective date of a contract, you want to make sure you establish that the effective date. Remember, guys, that the effective date is the date, not just that the contract was signed by the last party, but also initial. Any changes have to be initial and delivered. Okay, it has to be delivered. So remember, guys, that if somebody signs a contract yesterday but they don't send it to you until today is when your effective date starts. Okay, and your effective date counts pretty much like zero. It's so if somebody signed the contract yesterday and then they send it to me today, tomorrow would be day one of the contract. Today would be day zero. Okay, the day you get the contract is always day zero, and that's how you avoid issues of, sometimes they send you a contract, 9 a.m. or they might send it to you at 5 p.m. And if they send it to you obviously at 5 p.m., there's nothing you can do on that day. The day's already done. So so make sure you guys know how to establish that effective date. Okay. Escrow deposit, make sure by when the deposit is due, and always request an escrow letter. So you want to make sure that the very first thing, establish your effective date, and then know when the escrow deposit is due. Okay, so if the effective date, for example, was today, Thursday would be 1, Friday would be 2, Saturday would be 3. Okay, because you usually have 3 days. And if it lands on the weekend, it rolls over to Monday. So remember that it rolls over to Monday. So if you have an effective contract literally today, your escrow deposit will be due on Monday. So know when that's due, and you have to make sure the buyer does it, guys. We've had some cases where we've been lucky that it didn't create an issue, but we've had a few here and there, that the buyer for some reason didn't put the deposit in time and things like that. You guys have to be on top of the buyer. Even if you have to go pick up the check from the buyer, you got to do whatever it takes, guys. Whatever it takes. If you have a buyer that they have a job and they can't make it, they oh well, I work from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. I can't make it to the bank during the week. I would say, okay, do you have a check? Can you get a money order after hours, and I'll meet with you to pick it up or something. But you have to get that deposit in. Okay. So do whatever it takes to get that done. The problem that could arise, guys, is that if you break that, if you don't get that deposit within the 3 days, and you pretty much already breached the contract, and if for whatever reason the seller is looking to back out, maybe the seller gets a higher offer, something like that were to happen, and you breach that contract, the seller can back out. You got to always remember that if you breach the contract, if you don't do something that you're supposed to do in the contract, it's a breach, and the seller is able to cancel the contract the moment there's a breach. Okay, so that's the escrow deposit is super important. If a seller for some reason gets a higher offer, they can't back out of the contract. But if they have a good listing agent that knows what they're doing, that listing agent is going to say, okay, well, the first thing we're going to see is to see if they put the escrow deposit within the 3 days. Because if they didn't, we could use that as a way to back out. Okay. Next, inspection. Calculate the date of your inspection contingency expires. So make sure you know by what date that inspection is done. Usually now, a lot of the contracts I'm seeing, it's usually 5 days for inspection, 7 days, more or less around that time. So make sure you calculate that. Make sure you calculate the date the financing contingency expires. Okay. And also make sure by when they have to apply to the association and by when they must be approved. Okay. On the association addendum, it usually says that they need to apply within 5 days to the association and they need to be approved at least 5 days prior to closing. Okay. So make sure you calculate that. Make sure what days they need to do that. That's another thing that a way that a seller can back out is, if the buyer doesn't apply to the association within the 5 days, it's a reason, it's a breach. And if the seller for whatever reason, wants to get out of the contract, they're able to do that. So make sure that you know that those dates. Okay. Guys, so this is the best way that you want to establish what those dates are. This is an example of an email that you want to make sure you send to all parties. You want to send this to the buyer. You want to send this to the other agent, the listing agent. I send it to the title company and the lender as well, so that everybody is aware. And it's a simple email. You word it however you want to word it, but if you look at it, what it says here, it says we're officially under contract. Congrats to all party. I look forward to a smooth closing. Below are some important dates to keep in mind as we move forward. So you have your effective date, you have your escrow deposit, okay, by when it's due. You have your inspection contingency, which is super important. Remember, guys, that the inspection contingency is that period of time that you have to back out for whatever reason. And so you want to make sure you do your inspection during that time frame. You have your financing deadline. That's your deadline to make sure that you get the loan approved by that time. Okay, so super important. Remember, guys, at the financing deadline, if you pass that and for whatever reason your buyer does not get the loan approved, they lose their deposit unless it's because of an appraisal or something that has to do with the property that the buyer doesn't control. Okay, so remember that financing deadline is super important. So as that financing deadline approaches, you need to communicate with the lender and make sure, hey, are we good? Are we going to close? Is everything fine? Because if it's not, then we need to, back out of this deal, or else you're risking your buyer's deposit. Okay. You got your appraisal deadline. There are some cases where you do have an appraisal deadline. Sometimes it doesn't come up, sometimes it does. But technically, guys, remember that an appraisal, there's no time frame for it. The contract doesn't have that. But it is something that sometimes people will add to the contract. So yeah, so that one in this case, in this example, I put it there. Closing date, make sure you put your closing date, obviously, so everybody's aware of when you're closing. So you always want to make sure you send an email like this to everybody involved in the transaction so that everybody's aware. If you need to go back to it, if you're trying to remember real quick, you open up your email, look it up, and you can find where it is that, in your email, in your sent folder, and you can look at your dates real quick as a quick reminder. At the bottom here, guys, I added some additional ones that, if applicable, if you're doing a condo, make sure that the buyer gets the documents within 3 days. Okay. If the buyer doesn't get the documents, the condo documents, okay, meaning the rules, the bylaws, the rules and all that, the rules and regulations of the association, if they don't get that within 3 days, they can back out at any point in the transaction, guys. So make sure they get that within 3 days. It could hurt you because, and it's happened once. It happened to Blanca on one of her deals that they ended up using that as a reason to back out like 2 weeks into the deal. After the inspection period, they were like, oh, well, we didn't get the condo docs until like 10 days or 8 days or whatever it was. And a week and a half after they even got the condo docs, they used that as a reason to back out. So make sure the condo docs, guys, even if you're going to be listing a condo, um, make sure you get those condo docs to the buyer. And if you're representing the buyer, you want to make sure that that you get those within 3 days, because you don't want to you want to make sure your buyer doesn't have a reason, or I mean, it just depends, but typically you want to make sure your buyer doesn't have a reason to back out, and then you wasted all this time, you wasted all the effort, because the buyer has some reason they want to back out. So make sure, guys, just get the condo docs within 3 days. Talk to the listing agent. You got to communicate with them. They have to provide that to you. So make sure you have that communication with them. Association application deadline, 5 days by default on the association addendum. So make sure they get that. And again, appraisal deadline, I put there that it's negotiable. So for the most part, guys, the ones in the top that I listed here are going to be the main ones that apply. But the whole point of this, guys, is make sure you know your deadlines, make sure you lay it out, be transparent with everybody, and typically that leads to a smoother transaction. Okay. All right, guys. So let's talk about a little bit about the home inspection. So who should be there? It's highly recommended that the buyer attends, but it's not required. You guys as realtors should also be there, but it's not required. So technically, there's going to be cases where nobody goes to the inspection. That does happen. With a buyer, maybe they're out of town and they can't make it to the inspection, and sometimes the realtor can't make it either. But it's really recommended that you both are there, buyer and realtor, because you want to make sure like that you're hands on with the inspection. You're really looking at everything and you're really there. You guys know, some of you guys may know that I'm not a big fan of inspection reports, because I hate looking through them. So usually during the inspection, I'm always hands on, and I'm always like, what's wrong with the I want to leave the inspection knowing everything that is wrong. Okay, I don't want to not know anything that's wrong and then get it on the inspection report, and then I have to go through the inspection report, go through every page and read through it, because that's more time consuming. I rather, if I'm in the inspection, if I'm there with the inspector, let's go through it right here, while we're here at the inspection. Tell me everything that's wrong. Okay. So make sure you guys, your inspector should be, when you go to the inspection, typically, you're there, and if your buyer's there, you talk to your buyer, and you're just kind of going through the property, and you're just sort of, conversing with the client, building more rapport with the client while the inspection is happening, and letting the inspector do his thing. And I'll usually ask questions. I'll ask the inspector, oh, how was this? Oh, if I saw he just came down from the roof, I'll ask the inspector, oh, how's the roof? How's everything? Oh, how was the attic? Everything good so far? But always talk to your inspector to do like a rundown at the end of all the issues. Okay, that's usually the best way to do it, so that while you're at the inspection, you're with your buyer, you're just trying to build more rapport with them, getting to know them more. If it's a client you don't really know, building that relationship with them, and then at the end of the inspection, go through everything. Go through the kitchen, go through the bedrooms, go through the bathrooms, the roof, the backyard, AC, all electrical. Go through all those things, and if it's a good house, there usually isn't a lot of problems, and the inspector simply is just going to run through the few things that you should be aware of. Okay, but that's usually the best way to do it. I don't like to do it. I used to do it with my inspector, that as we go, he kind of tells me what's wrong, and then I realized that it's just better to do it at the end of the inspection. Just give me the rundown. Let's go through everything, and that way we do it all in one shot. Okay. Uh, After that, guys, big things to look out for: roof, electrical, plumbing, AC. Those are usually the very big things that ruin your deals. Roofs, as we know, are expensive. Tile roofs can run 30,000, 40,000. Sometimes cheaper, but they do get expensive. So a lot of times they could ruin your deals. Electrical, not so much, unless it's something really, really serious. Plumbing, yeah, that's definitely ruined some deals. I'm sure some of us have gone through that, where they have certain type of plumbing where the pipes are old or the pipes are known to give issues. So look into the plumbing part of it. Always ask about that. Uh, and plumbing is usually like an expensive repair. I mean, we've seen sometimes, some of these plumbing repairs be 8,000, 10,000 to replace the plumbing. So again, when it's stuff like that, it could ruin your deal because it's a huge expense. um, AC, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. AC, it's not that, it doesn't go for that much. A lot of times you can get an AC 3,500 or like under 5,000. So usually, the buyer is okay with that, or you can get a credit for that. But it can still be an issue. And if you have more than one of these, if you have like two issues, like I say, you got, the roof and the AC have our issues, then that those could become big issues. Okay, you got to understand that some buyers, the way the market is now, buyers are just taking things on, but there are times where some buyers are just not willing to buy a property that needs a brand new roof. Like I'm buying this house, I got to put 5% down payment, 10% down payment, whatever it is, and I got to pay for my closing costs. And then they might not have the money to say, oh, and I got to replace the roof. So so those are things that again, the look out for. Those are the big things. Typically, you before you even like put an offer, honestly, you want to ask about the roof. You want to ask about the AC. So if you decide, hey, I like this property, I want to put an offer on it. Typically, you want to ask up front, hey, how's the roof? So how's the AC? How old is it? So you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Okay. Um, Remember with like tile roofs, typically the life expectancy is about 30 years. So sometimes when they tell you a tile roof is 15 years old, your buyers looks at that and says, okay, well, I don't have to worry about this roof issue. I might not have to worry about anything for the next 15 years. I might not even own the house for that long. So it's not a big issue. But if you get a tile roof and they're telling you, oh, it's already 28, 29 years old, then that's when it comes into the buyer, and you got to, the buyer has to know that, hey, in the next 5 years or so, it's a possibility, that you might need to replace this roof. Okay. Um, so you want to then next negotiate repairs about in the inspection period. Okay. So you want to send an email to the listing agent with the inspection report and request either for seller to fix items or for the seller to give a credit towards buyer's closing costs. The best route typically almost always is to make sure that the seller gives you a credit. Okay. Try to avoid the seller doing any repairs, guys, because as we know, if you tell the seller to fix it, the seller's going to fix it in the cheapest way possible. And, a lot of times I've had terrible experiences with seller fix repairs. Not always, but about 60, 70% of the time, about the buyer's always upset the way it was fixed. Oh, they didn't fix this right. Oh, they use a cheap material. So the best thing to do, guys, ask for a credit for buyer's closing costs, um, and then the buyer can fix it after the closing. Okay, so that's money they don't have to bring to the closing table, and they can put it towards those repairs, and they can fix it to their taste. So that's typically the best way. When it comes to negotiating, asking for credits, guys, always go high. That's my biggest thing. I look through the when you look through the inspection report, it gives you estimates typically of what the repairs cost. Okay, so I usually will add all those up and ask for that or even a little more. Always go high, guys, when you're starting, when you're asking for a credit. And typically, what's going to happen is they might say yes right away. They might say, okay, yes, we'll give you the credit for that. Oh, awesome. Or they'll counter. They'll say, well, you're asking for $5,000 for repairs. We'll give you, seller is okay with giving you 3,000 or 2,500. Okay, and then you could accept that, or you can counter back. But always start high. Always go the highest. Definitely don't be conservative. Ask for ask for a good amount, because usually typically you're gonna get a counter on that. Okay, So make sure when you ask for, if you need 3,000, ask for 5,000. If you need 5,000, ask for 8,000. So make sure you start high with those negotiations, because they're typically going to try to bring you down. Most sellers, they just won't accept right away. Like, oh yeah, you want $8,000? Sure, here you go. They're going to counter back. They're going to say, no, we'll give you 3, we'll give you 4, and then, you can take it from there. You want to make sure, guys, when you're asking for these repairs, for the credits, you have to, even if you have to talk to your buyer, and you have to set them up for the expectation that they might not get that. Okay. They might not get anything. The seller might say, absolutely not. I have a bunch of other offers. If you guys don't want the property as is, I'm just gonna, you can cancel, and I'll take another offer. So you have to set the buyer's expectations that, first of all, that they might not get the repair, they might not get any credit. Okay. But you can try, but you're gonna give it a shot, and and more than likely you'll be able to get them something. And you have to, when you talk to the listing agent, you have to give them that sense that your buyer can walk away from the deal, that or your buyer's willing to walk away from the deal, because you want them to be like, oh well, if we don't give them something, and we don't give them this credit, we're gonna lose this deal, we're gonna lose this buyer. Okay, so you have to talk to them in a way, hey, listen, we love the property, but we didn't expect for these issues to arise. We need at least $5,000 for these repairs. Otherwise, my buyers just they don't want to deal with the hassle of it. They're just gonna probably move on, even if it's bullshit. Even if your client absolutely is gonna move forward, you have to give them the impression that the deal might be lost. I've had realtors, guys, come up to me, ask me for credits in a way that I'm like, no, I'm not giving you any credit. You're asking in a way that I know that your buyer's just gonna move forward with it. So like, I literally have had realtors say, hey, we want a credit for $5,000, but if you can't do it, it's fine. And I'm like, oh, okay. So if I can't, so then the answer is no. I'm not, I'm not. And the way they ask is just, oh well. So you're basically telling me it's like, if out of our kindness of our heart, if we want to do it, it's it's cool. If not, okay. And in those cases, I might tell my client, listen, it sounds like we don't need to give them anything, but if you want to, maybe, they're asking for 5,000. If you want to counter at, give them a $500 credit, that's all good. We're going to be able to move forward. So don't do that, guys. You have to make it seem, you have to give the impression that your client does not want to deal with the hassle of the repairs. Yeah, hey, we like the property, but we weren't expecting all these things to show up. So let me know if your seller's willing to give us a credit. Otherwise, I'll talk to my client, and we'll see how it goes. You gotta give them some impression that your client there's a chance that your client's probably going to back out if they don't give you the credit. Okay. And that takes practice, but those conversations, it takes practice, and you'll get better over time about it. But you got to put it to them like that. You got to put it to them like, hey, well, we'll see how it goes. If we're not able to get any type of credit, my buyer doesn't really want to deal with all that hassle. Now, if they come back and they tell you no, then, you say, okay, well, listen, let me talk to my client. Let me see how it goes. And, and then you reach back out to them a little later, and you let them know, oh, listen, my client, he worked it out. He decided he's going to move forward. That's it. You keep it moving. So guys, so the home inspection, the very first big hurdle you have to get through in your transaction, is the home inspection. So, just make sure, the biggest things I always just say is always figure out about the roof. Make sure the AC, the electrical, the plumbing, ask about those things. And then when it comes to negotiating repairs, it's simple, just a matter of sending an email. I prefer sending an email with the inspection report asking for the repairs. Some realtors choose to just have a conversation on the phone with the other agent and just, have it like that. No email involved, just have the conversation and negotiate over the phone. But remember, it's always good, have everything written, have everything on paper, so that you don't have any issues. Okay. Once they agree to the repairs, Simple, just do an addendum. Seller agrees to contribute $3,000 towards buyer's closing costs. Boom, and you're good. Okay. So let's move forward. All right. Real quick, also regarding types of home inspections, just know, guys, that there's the comprehensive general inspection. Okay, that's the main inspection report that it talks about the entire house from top to bottom. So that's the main inspection report that you need to always ask for. Um, you also need the 4-point inspection if the home is older than 30 years. So if the home is older than 30 years, okay, and I believe that's still accurate. I was reading somewhere that might have changed to be a little less. Um, but if it's older than 30 years, and just ask your home inspector, and usually your home inspector knows. If they know you're financing the property, they look to see how old it is, and right away they know, okay, well, you need a 4-point inspection. The 4-point inspection, guys, it's a report that covers the roof, electrical, plumbing, and AC. Those are the 4 points. It's required for homeowners insurance. So that's the reason you need it. So typically, guys, the comprehensive general inspection is going to run you guys maybe $200, $150, whatever the inspector charges. And usually your 4-point inspection is like an extra $75, sometimes $100, depending again on the inspector. You need a wind mitigation report. Wind mitigation report is what gives you credit for exactly what it says. Your home, if the home is protected from wind, so that's how you get your credit for shutters. If the house has impact windows, that's how you get your credit for insurance, which is one of the biggest credits that you get with insurance. So there's been times, guys, with the wind mitigation report that we get an insurance quote of like $4,000 a year, and we provide the wind mitigation, and it brings it down to $3,000 a year. So it's a big, big credit. Okay, if the home has impact windows or shutters or certain type of roofs. So the wind mitigation inspection report, typically you're always going to do it because you want that credit for the insurance. Okay. Termite inspection, it's not always necessary, but you always want to you always want to try to do that inspection. So you always want to ask to do a termite inspection. Uh, Most inspectors won't necessarily they'll only do that if or give you a termite inspection report if they see visually evidence of termites, guys. But you always want to ask about termites, okay? Always. You don't want the client coming back, 2 months after the closing saying, "Hey, man, the house is full of termites. We didn't catch this," and then you look bad, and that hurts that relationship with that client, and you might not get referral business from that client because they got an issue. Now they got to deal with termites. So guys, always ask about termites. Um, but typically termites is the inspectors just kind of go visually. They're gonna look. If they don't see any evidence of termites, then they typically don't go any further, because termites is something that you can typically see. You can see if there's termites. And the only way, and if you don't see any visual evidence of termites, the only way to inspect is to break walls, to break stuff, to really see into the wood and everything. And typically you don't want to go that far. So typically, again, they go off visual evidence, but always ask, guys, always ask about the termites. That's something that I'm telling you from experience. So always ask, hey, did you look for termites? Any evidence of termites at all? Uh, if you ever see little black grain, like it looks like little tiny grains, and they're all like they're in a little corner of the house. That typically is what termites look like. They're little black grain. It looks like, think of it maybe like sand almost, like little grains of little black stuff. If you ever see that in a house, question it and find out if it's termites. It's not necessarily termites, but it could be. And then finally, guys, mold inspections. Mold inspections are very rare. You don't always have to do them. The only time mold inspections are done is if you smell something off, or if you visually see something. But most of the time, guys, they're not going to do any type of mold inspection. There are clients, I've had clients that want to do the mold inspection with, even if there is no smell or there is no visual evidence of mold and nothing, that indicates there's mold in the house, but they still want to do the mold inspection because they probably had some sort of past experience with it. You know, it can be done, but it's a little pricey. The mold inspection does cost like 200, 250 bucks. So, so guys, for home inspections, for the most part, it's going to be the comprehensive general inspection report, the 4-point, and the wind mitigation. Okay. And then always ask about termites. All right. So make sure you don't forget that. Keep that in mind. So write down your notes and be ready for when you get to that point. Ask about termites. All right, guys. So just kind of recapping a little bit. Manage the buyer. So set the buyer's expectations low. Never promise that seller will do repairs. Refer to inspection report for estimate cost of needed repairs. If doubts, get a quote from a professional. Okay, so sometimes those repairs that the inspector might say, the electrical panel needs to be replaced and it's going to be an estimated cost of $800. Electrical panels, you can, I've seen them for 800, but usually they're a little more, like 1200. It just depends on, you know, the electrician that you find, you know, what's their price, you know. But so if you have doubts about what it may cost, you know, get an electrician, call an electrician up and say, hey, I need a quote for the panel. Or, you know, you might need a quote for the roof, or you might need a quote for the AC, just to make sure that, you know, what the inspector estimates is correct. Keep in mind that if seller have multiple offers, they may prefer to cancel and take another offer versus giving a large credit or doing repairs. And they may prefer, when I say they may prefer to cancel, I don't mean that the seller can cancel. The seller cannot cancel. I mean that the seller is going to let the buyer walk away. You know, try to get a credit for buyer's closing costs rather than the seller do the repairs. So that's how you want to manage the buyer during the inspection. Managing the listing agent, like I said, you want to make sure that they feel they might lose the deal. So ask for credit firmly. You know, make it seem to the agent as if the buyer is willing to walk away if they don't get the repair and the credit. All right. All right, let's move on, guys. Next, guys, the second big hurdle you have to go through, and generally once you get through the inspection, and once you get through the appraisal, you're typically home free, and you know it's just a matter of waiting for the closing date. So with the appraisal, guys, who orders it? The lender orders the appraisal through a third-party company. So we don't order the appraisal. The buyer does not order the appraisal. The buyer simply usually has to pay for it. So we got to make sure that, you know, and typically lender is on top of that. But it's ordered directly with the lender. We don't have control of who's going to be the appraisal, who's going to be the appraiser, or the company that's going to do the appraisal. We don't have control at all over that. Who should be at the appraisal? Agents nor clients are required to be there, so nobody's required really to be there. However, if there are concerns over appraisal, it's recommended one of the agents attend and provide report of comps, as well as a detailed report of any upgrades and or relevant information to the value of the property. So most of the times, guys, you know, you won't be there for the appraisal. The listing agent, hopefully they're there. A lot of times, guys, as a buyer's agent, you don't even know when the appraiser is going out because they don't call you. Most appraisers, 90% of the time, they're going to call the listing agent because they need to access the property. They're not going to call you to access the property. So a lot of times they call the listing agent. They say, hey, I'm the appraiser. I need to get into the property. I'm going to go on such date. The listing agent tells them, okay, yeah, here you go. Well, I'll meet you there, or whatever it may be. And that happens without your knowledge a lot of the times, you know. So typically, you know, you want to have communication with the listing agent through the process. So you do want to ask them, hey, did the appraiser go out already? Everything good? The lender also will be able to give you that information if the appraiser has been ordered and if they've gone out there. So, but usually you want to communicate with the listing agent on that. They're the ones that will know best if the appraiser has gone out there. If you have concerns about appraisal, I always recommend giving the appraiser comps and giving him a report. Like you can just write it on Microsoft Word, giving him a list of upgrades that have been done to the property. Hey, this, 3 years ago we changed the roof. 2 years ago we changed the AC. 4 years ago we resurfaced the pool. Whatever improvements have been done to the property, just make a list of them and at least provide them to the appraiser. Okay, so if you ever have concerns about that, take the extra time, do that. Sometimes you'll have a listing agent that is already doing that, which is great. But if if you feel like the listing agent is not gonna be pushing for that, talk to the listing agent, say, hey, I would like to be there for the appraisal. I just want to make sure, that, I provide him with as much information as possible so that we can try to get that appraisal up to what it needs to be. So please keep me informed of when the appraiser is going to go out. All right. Have that conversation with the listing agent. If you feel concerns, or if you have concerns that, hey, I need to do something to push this appraisal up. So I want to make sure that we provide this information to everybody. Hopefully, guys, you work with a good listing agent, but we know that that's not always the case, because when the listing agent does it, it's a lot more easier. But sometimes that's not the case, and you got to make that business decision for yourself if you want to do that, if you're gonna push that forward, if you're gonna say, okay, well, I'll take it on to myself to be there for the appraisal, give him the comms, give him all the upgrades of the property, so that you can get that value up. Okay. Negotiate price if necessary once the report is released. So if appraisal comes below asking price, it will be necessary to renegotiate terms. At this point, everything becomes negotiable again. Okay, or it could be. So if the appraisal comes at the purchase price or higher, everything's good. You just keep moving forward at the same purchase price. However, if the appraisal comes below the purchase price, that's when you have issues, and that's when you have to renegotiate. Okay. So basically what happens is, guys, that if the bank is giving somebody 90% financing on a property, and if the appraisal comes below the purchase price, now they're pretty much saying, hey, we are only going to give you 90% financing based on the appraised value. So so at that point, the contract sort of becomes, in a way, it sort of kind of, not that it becomes invalid, but in a way it just sort of, the appraisal value does not support the purchase price that you have on that contract. So at that point, it's almost like the contract is like, okay, well, it's not supported, so you can't get financing for it, and the buyer can back out. Okay. Typically what you'll try to do there is try to get the seller to bring the price down. So the very first thing, guys, you want to do is go up to the listing agent, say, hey, listen, we got the appraisal report. It's $15,000 under the purchase price. Unfortunately, my client, loves the property, but, they don't want to pay more than what it's worth. So, or maybe you already are offering 5,000 above appraisal or 3,000 above appraisal, whatever it may be. So you already say, hey, listen, we're willing to, again, just do the 5,000 above appraisal. That's all we're willing to do. So let me know if the seller's willing to drop the price, and we could get this deal done and get it closed. Okay. So the seller has to agree. The seller, remember, let's say the purchase price is 500,000, and it appraises at 485. Okay. And you've already agreed to, let's just say, because it's very common right now, that you've already agreed to give 5,000 above appraisal. Okay. So your purchase price is 500,000. It appraised at 485. So now, with the buyer giving the 5,000 above appraisal, you're at 490. Okay. But your original contract is for 500. The seller still has to agree, because you have to do an addendum changing the purchase price. The seller still has to then agree to drop price to 490. Okay. The seller still has to agree to that, because he's agreed to 500 with 5,000 above appraisal, but he didn't agree to 490. So you still have to do an addendum for that. Okay. Saying buyer and seller agree that the purchase price will be changed from 500,000 to 490,000. Perfect. Okay. So you got to make sure, again, it's the same thing. You want to reach out to the listing agent saying, hey, let me know if we got this deal done at 490, and, we'll close in, whenever your closing date is, hopefully within the next 2 weeks, and we'll get this deal done. So you want to approach it that way. And typically, a lot of times, if you got a seller that needs to sell, that needs to move forward, they get it. Hey, we tried at 500, it didn't happen. It's really, it came back at 490. It is what it is. I gotta sell the house. I gotta keep it moving. Okay. Most sellers, you'll get it done. Um, it's been happening, here and there, where sellers right now are wanting really high prices, really, I don't know, I want, the full price. That's what I'm asking. That's what I want, because the market is crazy and everybody's doing it. So I think we need to kind of calm down with the way we portray the craziness of the market right now to our clients, because our clients are feeling like, no, I want 500,000. I want that extra 10 grand, and it might ruin your deal if the buyer is not willing to do that. Okay. So if the seller is not willing to drop price to 490, then the ball goes back to the buyer. Okay. So now the ball's on the buyer's court, and the buyer has to decide, hey, seller's not budging. 500,000, that's what he wants. So it's up to you if you want to give an extra 10. Maybe you want to say, well, no, how about I give an extra 5? So we'll do it at 495. And maybe the seller will finally say yes. But if he says no, we had a recent deal like that, guys, where the seller was not dropping price at all. They were not dropping price at all. It was a small deal. I think it was 289, and it appraised at 265 roughly. And the seller was not dropping price at all, no matter what, nothing. Not, like we tried. How about, oh, we'll give you 5,000 above appraisal. Oh no, we'll give you 10. How about we give you 17? And it was just, it didn't happen. The seller just did not want to drop price. They were, and those deals suck because you waste time. And luckily the buyer was willing to go up to what they needed to get up to, and we got the deal done. We got a lender credit. The realtor gave a credit as well, and we were able to get it done. But those deals like that get pretty tough, because the seller doesn't want to drop price. So another thing I want to bring up, guys, which I wanted to bring it up yesterday in the cafecito, but I didn't get a chance to. And when it comes to the appraisals, is, guys, if the appraisal is gonna come low, if you look at those comps, and you look at what else has sold in the neighborhood, and everything that has sold in the neighborhood is $20,000-$30,000 less. That appraisals probably come low. Have the conversation with the listing agent. A conversation that goes like this: you want to say, hey, listen, I noticed that my buyer wants the property. We're gonna go full asking price. We want it, but I noticed the comps in the community are like $30,000 less. In the event that it doesn't appraise, I mean, is your seller willing to negotiate? Is your seller willing to be reasonable? I'm not. You can't get a commitment from them. They're not gonna tell you, oh yes, if it appraises low, we're dropping price, because you don't know what it's going to appraise at, and they're not going to commit to anything. But at least have the conversation with the listing agent of, hey, are we reasonable? Are they gonna play ball with us to get to a good number, to get to an agreement? And make sure the listing agent tells you yes. Like, hey, if it doesn't appraise, I've talked to them. We'll make it happen. I can't make any guarantees, but they're willing to negotiate. Okay, great. That's what I want to hear. Okay, because that way I know when that appraisal comes, 20,000 less or whatever it is. Hey, we'll get to something. We'll work it out. Even if the buyer has to come up with a little bit, the seller drops a little bit, we'll come to an agreement. But what I see happening is some of these sellers are like, no, I'm firm. Like, I'm not dropping any prices. I don't care. Like, what is the price of that? You got to have that conversation. Otherwise, you're going to waste your time, guys. If you see those comps are not there, if you see like this is not going to appraise, like we're just wasting our time. If the seller's not going to drop price, we're wasting our time. Then you got to your buyer has to make the decision if they want to go for it and waste the time. If the buyer says, hey, listen, let's just take a chance and see what the appraisal, who knows. Hey, it has happened before where we see comps really low and somehow that appraisal comes high. It has happened. But that there's been cases, and we've lost a few deals, and not just at Element, but other realtors I talked to at other companies in a similar scenario where the seller's firm on price, but the comps are just not there. So then you waste like 2 weeks of time, waiting for the appraisal to come. And then the seller's just like, no, I'm not budging. And the buyer doesn't have the money to come up with a difference. And then you just waste your time. So have that conversation, guys. Make sure you guys are having that conversation. it's not a conversation necessarily to have before your offer even gets accepted, but like right when the listing agent's talking to you, like, all right, we're gonna get this offer, we're gonna accept your offer. That's when you want to have that conversation. Okay, at that point, because you don't, there's no point in having that conversation before they even accept your offer. It's just a waste of time. So have, when the set listing agent is telling you, hey, we're gonna go ahead and go, we're gonna move forward and accept your offer, have that conversation if you feel it's necessary based on the comps, guys. That way you don't waste 2 to 3 weeks waiting for the appraisal and it comes low like it should because the comps, and then the seller's not budging. All right. And the seller's super firm on price and your buyer doesn't have the money to come up with the difference. So have those conversations, guys. All right. So that's pretty much it with the appraisal. If you have any questions, guys, but let me know, or at the end we'll go through it. All right, a few more things, guys. Roll up the title company. Once you gotta understand that your biggest jobs, like as I always say, is getting clients and getting them under contract. After that, you got to deal with the inspection. You might have to deal with the appraisal if it comes low, but everything else really is on the lender and title and the association if there's one. There's not much you can do. But let's talk real quick about the role of title in the basic, as basic as we can get. Title does the research of the property to make sure that there are no liens on the property and that the buyer is not going to have any issues legally with the city, the county, or anything like that. Okay, title company will pull records to make sure the property is free and clear of any liens, code violations, expired/open permits, and any other issues to title. If there are issues to title, then I always put it on the contract that seller will sell property to buyer free and clear of any liens, code violations, expired open permits. The contract already says that. Okay. The only one that it doesn't say, I'm 99% sure, code violations. It doesn't say that. I believe buyers will be in charge of code violations if there is. It just says that the buyer has to, look to fix that themselves. But I always write it in there on the contract, guys, and I teach you that. I know that with the market the way it is, sometimes we don't want to put that, which is fine. But the seller does have to take care of all that. So if there are any liens, any expired open permits, anything like that, the seller will have to take care of it. The problem is that sometimes it could take long to take care of it, and it could delay your closing. But most of the times, most deals, everything's free and clear, and we're good to move forward. And if it's not free and clear, it's typically something that can just get taken care of at the closing, and the seller pays it off, and it gets cleared up. Okay. They issue the title policy. So if everything's free and clear, they issue the title insurance policy. So once it's confirmed the property has clear title, the title company will issue a title commitment for a title insurance policy. And that's pretty much, what insures the buyer against anybody else claiming ownership to the property. And provide final numbers and coordinate closing. Title company will work with lender to make sure all numbers are correct and coordinate closing time with buyer and seller. That's pretty much what title does, guys. Make sure the property is free and clear of liens and code violations, things like that. Issue the title insurance policy, and then just do the numbers. Make sure that they communicate with the lender to get all the numbers correct of the transaction, and then do the actual closing itself. Okay. So what you want to do with title is just follow up at least once a week. Just call them up. Hey, I just want to make sure everything is okay, that everything's still moving forward, and just ask, hey, is there anything you need from me? Is there anything you need from the buyer? I just want to make sure everything's good. So I typically like to follow up with the title company once a week to make sure everything is good. If you work with a good title company, typically they follow up with you telling you everything is good, and it avoids you having to worry about that. So that's pretty much title. You just want to make sure that everything's good, and that everything's been cleared, and we're set for closing. Okay. The role of the lender, guys. So lender works with all parties to get all documentation necessary to get the loan approved and cleared for closing. So pretty much what the lender's doing is talking with the buyer, getting documents that they need from the buyer, and getting the file cleared, getting all the conditions clear so that the bank gives them the green light to give them the money. So very first step, usually the buyer will do a loan application. They'll order an appraisal. After the appraisal, usually they'll issue a loan commitment / loan approval. Uh, I think now most times we refer to it as a loan approval, but for many years we called it a loan commitment. But it's the same thing. Clear any remaining conditions. Okay, so if the buyer has, oh, they have to maybe pay something to the IRS, or they have to explain why they have a deposit of $20,000 in their account, or things like that. They usually have to, the lender asks, hey, what's this? Hey, what's that? They have to clear all those things and explain all those things, and just get it resolved. So once they clear any conditions, the lender will issue the clear to close, and they'll fund the loan at the day of closing. So they'll basically say, hey, we're good, we're clear to close. And typically, once they issue the clear to close, you would typically close, like, usually, like, sometimes you close the same day. I mean, it's happened, but typically within 3 days. Once they issue the clear to close, typically within 3 days, you'll be able to make it happen. So as you approach your closing date, if you're a week away, you got to be reaching out to the lender. Hey, do we have the clear to close? Okay. And once if you're 2-3 days away from the closing and you still don't have the clear to close, you probably are going to need an extension to the closing date. You might need an extra few more, 3 more days. They might tell you need an extra week, whatever it may be. Sometimes there's things that, that are out of our control as realtors that the lender has to resolve that take more time. So sometimes, you might put on the initial contract that, hey, I'm going to close in 30 days, but, you might need 40 days to close, and it's out of our control. We just hope, all we can do is hope the lender that we're working with is doing everything that they're supposed to do to get everything done as fast as possible. Okay. But that's pretty much the role of the lender, guys. And the way you want to handle that is, again, follow up weekly, making sure that, hey, the lender's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Make sure you're following up with your buyer as well. And you ask questions. Hey, how's the lender going? What's the process? Where do you stand? And just keep an eye on it. But at the end of the day, guys, it's something we cannot control. It's something that, it's in the hands of the lender. They're the ones that got to take us to the final, to the closing table, pretty much. Okay. All right, guys. Again, follow up. Manage the transaction. Be sure to follow up with lender, title, the association. You want to make sure you're in touch with your buyer. But mainly, guys, make sure you're on top with the lender and title. Make sure you don't go a week without talking to either of them. You should never go more than a week without talking with them. One thing about managing the transaction, guys, is you could use what is called a transaction coordinator. Usually they charge $400-$500 per transaction, and they'll do all this for you. They'll do all the following up for you. So if we know some good transaction coordinators that once they get the transaction, they do the follow up and they make sure everything is good. And if something's not good, they'll make you aware of it so that you can handle it. But that I really recommend for more experienced agents. Typically newer agents, I really recommend that you guys go through it yourself so you can learn the transaction, so you can learn how it goes. And then once you know how it goes and your business is getting better and you're more focused on doing showings and making sure you're getting your clients under contract and procuring new business, when you got a lot of you're really busy with that part of it, then I recommend getting a transaction coordinator to help you with all this extra stuff. Okay, because at the end of the day, you're following up and you're making sure that everything is on point, but that's not making you money. That's not bringing you business. That's just things you got to do to make sure you close that business, but it's not bringing you any money to do that. You know what I mean? Whereas you could be doing other activities to make sure that you're getting new buyers. You could be following up, making phone calls, writing letters, doing your mail outs, doing social media. You can be doing stuff that gets you more business, and you don't got to be focused on following up with the lender, following up with title, and following up with the association and all those things. Okay. So a transaction coordinator is really good for that. Guys, ask for reviews during the transaction. Okay. So so this is very kind of a big. I strongly recommend new agent, experienced agent. It doesn't matter. Make sure you're asking for reviews during your transaction. Okay, it really works really well. They're really happy with you through the process, and typically, though you might be able to. A lot of times, agents, what we used to do and what I used to teach is ask at the end of the transaction, or as once you get the clear to close, ask for a review. Okay, but I started saying, you know what? There's a lot of things out there. There's Google, there's Zillow, there's your Facebook page, Yelp, there's Realtor.com. There's so many places where people can give you reviews, and it's really tough to like ask people to give you a review. Oh, hey, can you review me on all these websites? And it's tough to ask for them at the same time. So this works really well. Ask for a review. Pick whatever you decide you want to go. If you want Zillow, if you want Google, if you want Facebook, whatever you want. My biggest recommendation, guys, I think at the end of the day, I'm all in personally on Google. I really believe on having your Google business page. I think whatever happens, you never know what's going to happen with Zillow. You never know what may happen with Realtor.com. So Google, that's going to be there. So I always recommend Google as your first option. Okay. So make sure you get your review on Google from the client. But it doesn't hurt to get other places as well. So what I always recommend is during the transaction, after certain points, ask for the reviews. So when should you ask for it? After the inspection period, or really once your inspection is good, once you've gotten through that, ask for a review. Okay. All right. The way you want to do that is sending an email. Send an email to the client. Hey, leave me a review. Okay. And then put the link. Make it easy for them. They can tap on the link and they can go ahead and drop the review. Do it again after the appraisal. Okay. Because that's another big hurdle you went through. And usually after that, they're good. They're like, okay, I'm getting this house. I'm moving forward with it. Ask for another review. And then ask for another review after clear to close. Okay, if you're like, oh, I only really want one review in one place, that's where I want them. The best time typically is after the clear to close. Okay, because they're happy at that moment. They're like, okay, I got the clear to close. I'm closing. Just don't do it typically after closing, guys, because they're moving, they're busy, a bunch of stuff is happening, and once buyers they close, it's like their mindset changes to like, all right, I gotta move in. I gotta bring the moving truck, and you know how moving is. It sucks. I'm going through it right now. So make sure you do it before the closing. Okay, before the closing, or like literally like at the closing, ask for it. Okay, if you forget. But the best way, guys, is really set up some emails. Have them already set so that you can get those reviews. Can those emails asking for those reviews go out? Guys, this is super important, guys. You want to have those reviews. You want to make sure that you show your results. And as people in future business, they're always going to be Googling you. They're always going to look at to see what the reviews are. I'm a big review person. Whenever I use somebody, I look them up and I see what the reviews are. I know some of us do the same exact thing. Probably all of us do the same exact thing when we're going to hire somebody. I just hired a moving company. I went on Google, looked up the reviews for the moving company to make sure they were good. And I looked through a few, and there were some that I was like, and then there were some that were like, oh, wow, these have really, it's not perfect, but they have really, really good reviews. So I literally pretty much went with the one that had the most reviews. So again, get your reviews, guys. Super important. You want to make sure you get that part done. Other things to look out for, guys. Association approval. If required by association, you got to make sure you obtain your approval. There are associations out there that take 30 days, and they'll take the full 30 days to get you approved. And you also want to make sure you're on top of your buyer to do the application. This is one where you might have to go above and beyond. If you got a buyer and hey, I'm a nurse, I'm working 12-hour shifts. Hey, what can I do to help you do it? Okay. At the end of the day, put it on them. At the when hey, you have to apply for the association. This is how you apply. Go do it. But and then you got to follow up. And if for whatever reason they're not doing it, ask them, hey, what can I do to help you to make sure we get this application in, because we have 5 days to apply. So, how can I help you? And see what you can do, But at the end of the day, put it on them, because it does ask some personal information. It's going to ask for social security. It's going to ask for certain things. And you don't know all that stuff. It's going to ask them for, what type of car you drive, what's your license plate number, like, you don't know any of that information. So, put it on them. But if you see, oh, by the fourth day, they still don't have it in, or late in the third day, they still don't have it in, be like, hey, what's going on? Is there anything I can do to help you to get this application in? Okay. Homeowners insurance, make sure buyer obtains homeowners insurance. Recommend an agent if you know a good one, or have the buyer search on their own. A lot of times the lender will help them with the homeowners insurance as well. I know Angelo does that. So typically, when it comes to homeowners insurance, it's not something I typically worry about. But there's some lenders out there that, they tell the buyer, oh no, find homeowners insurance and bring me the policy. So, if that's the case, make sure they get that. Okay. For the homeowners insurance, guys, you need the inspection report. So you have to wait until after you get the 4-point inspection and the wind mitigation inspection, and then you can go find the homeowners insurance quote. If you try to get one before that, it's not going to be accurate. Okay. Survey and flood insurance. Survey is required in order to get the elevation certificate, which is needed for flood insurance. So survey is something that's ordered by the title company, and it lets you know if you need flood insurance. So just kind of be aware of that flood insurance is something. It's like I think it's $400 or $500 a year. So sometimes that does come up, and it's an extra expense. But and you won't know that. So the thing about the flood insurance, guys, is that a lot of times you won't know until the end, unless you somehow maybe you talk to the seller while you're doing the showing, or you ask that question about flood insurance and they tell you. You won't know if you need flood insurance until the end. Another way to find out if you need flood insurance is through IMAP. So IMAP, if you guys go down, it'll tell you the flood zone, and pretty much if it says flood zone X, then you don't need insurance, which is most of the time. But if it doesn't say flood zone X, if it says flood zone anything else, literally, then you need flood insurance. Okay. So if you want to get ahead of that in a way, you could by going to IMAP. But typically what will happen is the lender will come up at some point in the transaction. The lender will say, hey, we looked it up ourselves and we see that you need flood insurance. Okay, great. And then once that happens, then then you go to the insurance company, but the insurance company is going to say, well, we need the elevation certificate to provide the flood insurance. So then you got to go to the title company and you got to say, hey, we need the survey because we need the elevation certificate to get flood insurance so that we can get the flood insurance to the lender. The big issue with that, guys, and it happens sometimes, the problem is that title companies have a tendency to order surveys at the last minute. Okay. So if that does come up, you got to tell them, hey, I know you guys like to order at the last minute, but I need the survey now. And, I need the flood insurance now because we got to clear this with the lender. Otherwise, we can't get it clear to close. So when that comes up, you just got to ask the title company for the survey. And usually within a day or two, they'll have it for you. Okay. Condo docs received by the buyers. Make sure condo docs are received within 3 days. Talk to the listing agent. Make sure you get it done. And final walkthrough, guys. Remember to schedule a final walkthrough, preferably the day of closing or the day before. Preferably the day of closing, really. But if you can't do it the day of closing, the day before closing will do. I had one case where I did the walkthrough the day before closing on a Sunday. They closed on Monday, and they go to the house on Tuesday, and somebody there was like a broken window or something that wasn't there on Sunday. So it could happen, guys. That's why I'm really a big fan of literally doing the walkthrough right before closing. But sometimes schedules don't allow for that, so you have to do it the day before, and it is what it is. Hopefully that doesn't come up. Unfortunately, in that case, there was nothing that could be done because we had already closed. So the fact that the window was broken at the time of closing, at the time of the walkthrough, it is what it is. And then by the time we closed, unfortunately, it had to be, it was just, that's the price of home ownership. You own the house now, you gotta, anything that goes wrong, you gotta take care of it. So it was just a little unlucky. But it wasn't bad. Like that particular buyer, it wasn't bad. I ended up actually helping out her two family members of theirs, and they understood. And they would have been like really upset, and I sensed that they kind of were upset with me maybe for some reason. I would have maybe probably offered like, hey, all right, let me see what I can do to help you with this window, because I don't want to lose that relationship ever with a client. Okay, so I would have done that, but they understood. They were like, hey, Vic, it's like, what are you gonna do? It happens, and we left it as is, and they took care of it. All right. Oh, what I hit? Not sure what I hit. All right, guys. Finally, prepare for closing. Schedule final walkthrough. So you want to make sure you schedule a final walkthrough. The final walkthrough, guys, is just to make sure that the property is in the same conditions as it was at the time of showing or at the time of inspection. If for whatever reason something comes up during the final walkthrough, you can ask for a credit from the seller to get it fixed. Okay, and that's typically what will happen. So if you show up to a final walkthrough and all of a sudden I see a leak in the roof, that could be a big issue. But a lot of times, typically, you could ask for some sort of credit, and then the buyer says, okay, well, I'll get it fixed with this credit. Okay. Review closing disclosure. So you want to make sure that the numbers are correct on your transaction, guys. This takes a little bit of training. So when those times come, I always go through it with you guys. But you want to make sure that you look through the closing disclosure and you look at the buyer's side of the transaction and that the numbers look correct. Now, the main numbers that you are looking for, honestly, are the main numbers that what they are. You want to make sure your commission is correct. You want to make sure the brokerage fee is there. Okay. Then you want to look through what the lending is charging, and you want to look through what the title company is charging. And a lot of times, guys, those costs are gonna be what they are. Like you don't know what they are. Like a lot of times we don't know what the lender. I don't know that the lender's charging $800 admin fee or a $400 admin fee. I'm not sure. I don't know what they are. But you want to look through them. You want to make sure they just make sense. Okay. If I look through that and I saw you know, $2,500 underwriting fee, I would question it. I'd be like, wait, what? $2,500 underwriting fee? What is that? Usually that goes like $800. If I look through the settlement statement and I see, $1,800 settlement fee, I'd be like, why is there an $1,800 settlement fee? A settlement fee is typically, 795, 695, whatever it is. $500, $800, whatever. Maybe $1,000 if there's a really high price point. But if I see like a really high, unusual number, question it. Be like, hey, what is this? I see this number here is really high. But for the most part, when you're reviewing those numbers, it's gonna be $400, $300, $50 for little things here and there. Um, and the costs are what the costs are. But what you typically you just want to see if there's anything that stands out that you're like, hey, what is this charge exactly? Like, why is this really high? Maybe you want to question it, and most of the times it's gonna be legit, like that's what it is. But just in case, you never know. It might be they might be overcharging for something, or it might be a mistake. So definitely look through that. And closing gift, guys, make sure this is a huge milestone for many, many people. Make it memorable for them. Champagne, gift baskets, wine are great. And get creative. Sometimes I see some of you guys. You guys get TVs for your client. You guys get barbecues for your clients. Get creative with it and give them something that's going to be memorable and special. And you want to make sure that that day it's a celebration. Okay, that it's a celebration and it feels like a celebration. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm just signing paperwork. It feels like a happy day with champagne and it's smiles and everybody's happy and laughing. So make sure that you provide that experience for your clients, guys. Um, After that, guys, it's just a matter of keeping in touch. Making sure you follow up with the client. I typically call them about a week later just to see how making sure everything with their move is going well and to see if there's anything at all that I could do to help them. And you typically just want to, after that, make sure you set them up on some sort of drip campaign. You could do that on Chime. Make sure you set them up on some sort of drip campaign that's gonna just send them emails periodically. And then what you want to do, guys, is just follow up with them, 2, 3 times a year. Ask for referral business. Make sure when you close, you ask for referral business at that point as well. Hey, if you know anybody else that wants to buy or sell a home, let me know. A lot of things, a lot of times, guys, you get buyers refer buyers. Okay, so you got to understand that when a buyer starts buying a home, their whole life becomes about buying a home, and then all of a sudden they start talking to other people that want to buy a house. So ask them for referral business throughout the transaction. Typically, when you get them on their contract, be like, hey, well, listen, we're gonna get this process going, and if there's any, by the way, if there's anybody else that's looking to buy or sell a home, I'm always looking for new business. I'm always hoping to help new clients. So keep me in mind if you hear of anybody, and then make sure you let them know that again at the closing. And then that way they know that you want business, that you want referrals, and you're always going to be letting them know that as you build your relationship with them after closing. And yeah, so guys, I hope you got a lot of this training. I'm recording it, so it's gonna be on the YouTube page. So if you didn't catch it, if you didn't miss anything, or I mean, if you missed a few things, you can always go back, review it, listen to it. I'm gonna be doing that with all the trainings. I'll share that link on YouTube too, so you guys, if there's any other type of videos you guys want to watch. Any questions, anything at all? I see pretty much everybody on here. I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna have any questions on it. But just in case, I'm gonna ask. Oh, yeah. So guys, pretty much that's the process. That's how you want to handle it. The biggest thing that I'll leave you with is just it's just from contract to close, you just want to make sure your client has a good experience. You want to make sure your client and you always want to think about how you make that better. How can I make my client's experience better? And it comes down a lot of times to communication, just making sure that the buyer knows every step of the way, that you're there too. Don't go too long without talking to your buyers. Don't make them feel like once you got them under contract that you forgot about them. So make sure you're always reaching out, even if it's just a quick touch up, just following up, just making sure everything's going well. Because there are times during a transaction where you're sort of just waiting, that there's nothing really there's no action necessarily that needs to be taken. You're just waiting. But even during those times, it's good to just follow up, make sure they know you're still there, and make sure, hey, do you have any questions? Are there anything? Do you have any questions or concerns that I can address or I can help you with? So make sure you provide a great experience, guys. That's what is going to lead to more business, more referrals, and you building your sphere of influence. And if you treat people right, guys, so you not only you're gonna help them, but you're gonna help their best friends. You're gonna help their family members. You're gonna help them in the future, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, whenever they want to resell that house, or help them buy an investment property when they're ready. So you want to make sure you give a great experience, because people will remember that and people will value that. Okay, guys. So I'll leave you off with that. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being on the call. Whatever you guys need, as always, reach out to me. Let me know any help, anything going on with your deals. I'm always here, and I look forward to helping you guys. Okay, next week we're gonna be doing more training. And don't forget, guys, on the 28th, please, we're having a big meeting here at the office. So we're gonna have lunch here. We're gonna have sushi or some Asian stuff. So please come through, and it's gonna be good. Okay. All right, guys. Jesus, Claudia, Alain, thank you for tuning in. Gladys was on here. I think she jumped off.
That'll be good. See you soon. Let it that way.
All right. Yep. I'll be here. All right, guys. Take care.